So I'm from the National Motor Freight Traffic Association. A bit of a mouthful. NMFTA, sometimes easier. But we focus on research and standards, best practice guidance around cybersecurity in particular in transportation. And right now, there's an interesting correlation between the tactics and techniques being used by your standard cybercrime, cyber criminals, and those that are being used to facilitate cargo fraud, cargo theft. So we're going to talk a little bit about the similarities and then some of the controls that can be put in place in a cybersecurity aspect in order to help mitigate cargo crime. So Barry hit on a few of these in his opening remarks. There's a lot of similarities between the tactics and techniques being used by your traditional ransomware gangs, data theft, those types of attacks, and the same techniques that are being used by cargo thieves, fraudsters. So number one, we see social engineering. This is not a surprise. Social engineering has always been the easiest way into just about any organization. And we see as we are witnessing this explosive growth use of LLMs and generative AI, we've seen a related increase in the sophistication and the scale and speed of social engineering attacks. Phishing, or the voice call scams that we were seeing in the first presentation, very easy to do, very difficult to trace, very difficult to block. And we've seen I think the number in CrowdStrike's annual report from 2024 was a 400% increase in voice-based phishing attacks or phishing attacks. Credential harvesting and identity theft. Those can be browser-based credential harvesters. That can be more sophisticated identity theft when we think about a stolen carrier identity, going as far as taking over an FMCSA carrier profile, changing contact information, things like that. And then we have some pretty standard cybersecurity threat vectors like unpatched systems and vulnerabilities in software and platforms that are utilized across your organization. What I want to talk about a little bit more is access control. And that's not just the access control, the technical access control to your systems, but it's the thought process around how do you control access in your organization as a principle. And we think of things like least privilege. Do you need that access to all of the information you can access with your credentials? And then most importantly, what do we do with that access when someone leaves the organization? We usually have a really good process for onboarding and vetting people as they come into the organization, but where we see it fall apart sometimes is in the offboarding process, and we leave credentials active when an employee leaves. So we want to think about those things when we talk about access control as well. When it comes to cargo crime and the cybersecurity aspect of cargo crime, there really isn't any magic silver bullet that's going to solve this problem. Cybersecurity practices alone are not going to solve the issue. There's three spheres of security practices that need to work together. There's your cybersecurity controls, your operational security controls, and then your physical security controls. And in transportation, we're all pretty familiar with the physical security. You think locks and gates and guards and seals on trailers, things like that. The operational security is your processes. What sort of controls do you put in place to verify information being changed for payment contract information, or the vetting processes you have for your new partner? And then the cybersecurity controls, there are the standalone cybersecurity controls that we were talking about just a minute ago, but we also have kind of a crossover between those controls where cybersecurity controls augment or support your operational security, and they support your physical security. If you think about sensors, cameras, connected IoT infrastructure that we are now deploying as part of our physical security, there is a cybersecurity aspect to that as well. And so it's really thinking about all three of those practices in a holistic sense and how they need to be developed in a way where they support each other and are designed, the controls in each sphere are designed to be aware of the controls in the other related spheres. So it really comes down to planning out your security processes, your security investments, and in a preparedness kind of way. So we're going to talk quickly about some cyber operational controls, and we'll probably get into some more of this in the panel discussion. But we really want to think about security-informed digital processes. So as we digitize, and we think e-bills of lading, we think telematics tracking, all of the new tools that have come into the industry over the last 15, 20 years we've digitized. We want to make those additions to our businesses in a security-informed way. Understand what risks come with each new technology we introduce, and understand how those new technologies may impact existing systems or interweave with existing technology. We want to build in the operational controls as we make the security investment, not find the holes later and try to bolt on an operational security control around that process. And then training, can't say training enough. As far as operational controls, that is where your training really will bear the highest return, is understanding the processes, and then also training employees on not just understanding what the process is and that they should follow it, but understanding when are exceptions warranted, because there's exceptions in almost every process. We need to understand when are those okay, who needs to be involved, how are they documented, and what are the safeguards put around those exceptions. When it comes to the law enforcement response, and again, we heard a lot about this earlier, and an important thing about the law enforcement response to cargo crime is it is fractured across local, state, and federal jurisdictions. A lot of these criminal organizations are being orchestrated from overseas. They're not in countries that are going to respond to wants and warrants or extradition or anything like that. And so it's important to understand which law enforcement entities you need to get involved and when, because as Barry was saying, time is absolutely critical in the response, the law enforcement aspect, as is contacting the right organization or the right agency at the right stage in the investigation. And you don't want to try and figure all of this out during a response or after a crime has occurred. You want to develop these relationships in advance, get to know your local FBI branch office, who to contact there. Can they put you in touch with a cargo crime task force contact? There are some other cargo crime specific task forces and joint task forces across the different federal agencies. HSI has one, TSA is involved in several. So understanding who those players are and developing relationships with them in advance is important. We want to understand, we don't necessarily just want to report the physical theft. We want to report, was identity fraud involved? Did a phishing email start this? These are all factors that may broaden the jurisdiction and may broaden the scope of the investigation, and you want to understand how to properly report those factors. Talk a little bit about the concept of red zones and understanding your danger areas in your freight network. Understanding your exposure is important, and it's important to include not just your physical risk, where you operate, what commodities you transport, but understanding what's your overall organizational cyber hygiene profile. How mature is your awareness training process? How resilient are your controls? Have you tested the controls that you put in place, so that you can create an informed decision about where your risk level is in the business and what levers to pull to either invest more or perhaps reallocate investment in security. And really, the key to preventative cybersecurity controls is really your team, your humans. The employees are not only the weakest link, but they're also your best asset when it comes to preventing these types of crimes. We need to understand the ways that the attacks are being launched, the techniques that are being used, and we don't want to just do generic awareness training about, don't click on phishing links. Really focus your training on relevant, recent examples or current trends that are occurring in the cargo crime world. A lot of times we see a sort of one size fits all, check the compliance box, the security training, and we really want to tailor that down to precisely the roles. In a brokerage, your carrier reps are going to have one type of interaction. If you're a shipper, you're going to have different types of interactions. a carrier dealing with drivers or maybe independent owner operators, they're going to have different kinds of digital interactions. And so really tailoring the training to the specific situations and scenarios that your employees are likely to see. And then understanding also, is your training landing with your employees? Is it making an impact? And can you quantify that? We don't want to just train and say we've trained and then have the same issues come up year after year after year. We want to check what our awareness level is and what our kind of our baseline is prior to the training. And then make sure you can quantify the changes in your awareness level among your employees after the training. We're going to, there's going to be a hook that'll pull me off stage if I go too long, but we are going to, we host a cybersecurity conference in the fall. It's actually going to be here in Texas this year, Austin. So specific to cybersecurity in trucking and also to the cargo crime epidemic that's impacting us and how cybersecurity controls can help to mitigate those risks. So dates are up there and hope to see all of you. I'll be around after the panel as well if anybody has any additional questions. Thank you.